Welcome to Wesley Impact. I'm Keith Garner. Do you ever feel that life has treated you unfairly? Perhaps if you see someone else receive something that you consider they don't deserve. I'm glad you're able to join us today. We've got a very full programme. I've got a special guest I'm looking forward to talking to in just a few moments. Dr Keith Suter has been a member of Wesley Mission for many years, dating back through certainly 3 superintendents, and because of that, he's been thoroughly part of my own period of time here at Wesley Mission. He certainly knows a lot about Wesley Mission very, very well. In our conversation later, we'll talk a bit about that history, dating back to Alan Walker and Keith's involvement with our work. We'll also talk about his work, which has gone on in many other ways in terms of being a speaker, author, futurist and media commentator. We'll be joined also by Jhoanna Aguila, who will be supported by the Wesley Impact Band singing The Blessing. And I'll share some thoughts on how Jesus uses the intriguing parable of the workers in the vineyard to explain the unmerited, unearned grace of God for each of us. But before I go much further, I'd like to share with you a letter which I received. A regular viewer to this programme has heard us talk about our commitment to the Christian way and asks, why does Wesley Mission continue to have its Christian faith at the centre of its work? Well, surely it'd be easier, the person is thinking, if they were to kind of just do kind of community work and disregard the Christian faith. Why do faith and works, writes this person, come together at Wesley Mission? Well, the answer is it always has. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. It's actually a distinctive part. You know, there are many, many agencies today that began in the Christian community but are no longer actually Christian agencies in terms of churches and worship. So I think it's a rather distinctive thing that we do. And it's what inspires us. It's what leads us. It's what gives us shape to what we do. And I think because of that, we're able to deal with people and do things that many of us would disregard. We're not just about making money, we're about caring for people. And I believe that is so very, very important. And I hope that goes some way to explaining why word and deed for us come together as we provide for our community services and our church life in the community. Now, I'm one of those few people who had the privilege of leading the work at Wesley Mission as superintendent. Prior to me was Gordon Moyes, before that Alan Walker, and a succession of 6 other people dating back over many, many years. Let's take a look at the history of the superintendents here at Wesley Mission.
The origins of Wesley Mission stretch back to the first Methodist church established in Sydney in 1812. Since our foundation, we have been a community of hope and grace, providing care to those who are frail, lonely, disconnected and marginalised in Sydney and beyond. And throughout our history, we have been guided by a strong line of faithful, passionate leaders. 1812 was a time when liberty, grace and possibility were alive in the early colony. Convinced of the need for someone to guide them, the early Methodists wrote a compelling and successful appeal to the British Methodist Conference to send a minister to the new colony. The Reverend Samuel Lee arrived in Australia in 1815. In 1884, W.G. Taylor was appointed superintendent. A new word and deed policy was developed, committed evangelism coupled with serving the practical needs of the community. It was he who coined the term, a living Christ for a dying world. Taylor retired after 22 years and the Reverend P.J. Stephen took on superintendency. He was followed by the Reverend Samuel J. Hoban, who led Wesley Mission from 1915 to 1921 through the difficult years of the First World War. The Reverend H.C. Foreman succeeded him for a 10-year term until 1931. The Reverend R.J. Williams was superintendent for the next 6 years, serving as leader throughout the Depression. In 1938, the Reverend F.H. Raywood was appointed superintendent, leading until 1958, when the Reverend Alan Walker took up the position. A passionate and outspoken leader, Walker used the media extensively and attracted both praise and criticism for his dynamic leadership style. Into these shoes, the young Gordon Moyes stepped. It was in 1978 that the Reverend Gordon Moyes began his 27-year tenure of superintendency, overseeing the enrichment of Wesley Mission's media profile and continuing the strong word and deed ministry of Wesley Mission. In 1988, Moyes oversaw the extensive redevelopment of the old Lyceum Theatre in Pitt Street, Sydney. A new building was designed and built, containing a theatre, church, head office and conference centre. Gordon Moyes retired from superintendency in 2005 and Keith Garner took up the role, a position that he continues in today. It is remarkable to see how things have grown at Wesley Mission. Today, more than 2,000 staff and 3,000 volunteers continue in the footsteps of those who have gone before, caring for those in need and sharing the generous love of Jesus Christ without fear or favour.
If you would like to learn more about Wesley Mission, visit wesleymission.org.au. You can find help in our community services, connect with our church and congregations, discover a volunteer role that suits you, stay up to date on the latest news and information, donate to support our work, and help make a positive difference in your community. You can also connect with us on social media and subscribe to receive the latest news and information about Wesley Mission directly into your inbox. Visit wesleymission.org.au.
I always look forward to hearing from you. Be in touch if we can help you in some way or a loved one. Our contact details are on the screen now and the doors of Wesley Mission are open for your entry and being a part of our community. I've been looking forward to my conversation with today's guest for some time. Keith, it's good to have you on the show. Tell me when you first arrived in Australia.
So I came to Australia temporarily in 1973 to do what was my first PhD. So I was still on unpaid leave from the War Office. I just completed my first degree in England and came here to do what became my first PhD, which was on the international law of guerrilla warfare, intending to go back to England. But in fact, I just decided to stay on. So
what about your link at Wesley Mission? How did that happen?
So I've just got to get the years right, 1976, I was finishing the PhD. I couldn't go back to the United Kingdom until it had been examined. And so I had to find temporary employment. And I was at a Christian conference and somebody said, oh, well, Alan Walker, at what was then the Central Methodist Mission, was looking for a director of administration. Why don't you go to work there for a few years, get the PhD sorted out, then you can return to England. And then I've just stayed on. I've stayed on connected with the mission all the way through from 1976 onwards.
And it's been very much a part of your life, really, hasn't it?
Very much so. And indeed, my third PhD, which I've recently completed...
There's no need to brag, you know.
My third PhD is looking at the future of the Uniting Church and how it could evolve. And a lot of that is drawn from my experience at being at the mission. Indeed, one of the scenarios that I talk about the future of the Uniting Church is actually called Word and Deed, which is, of course, the way in our business model at Wesley Mission.
And do you think we've got it right? I
think that it's with scenario planning, there are basically three ways of thinking about the future. One is prediction. Like, you know, who's going to win, I don't know, the Melbourne Cup or who's going to win the presidential election. Most predictions don't work, but one has certainly continued to work, which is relating to the power of, or growing power of computers. So that's one way of thinking about the future, making predictions. The second way is having a vision, a preferred way that you then work towards. So you build a bridge back from the future, from the future to the present, like putting a man on the moon. President Kennedy's 1962 pledge, and so they had to work out how they're going to do that. That's the vision, and you work backwards. Third way of thinking about the future is what could happen, not what is being currently predicted, not what you'd necessarily like to see happen, but what could happen. You know, we've just gone through this coronavirus crisis, for example, and no one had seen that coming, and we should have been having contingency plans to make sure that we had appropriate healthcare, etc. Now, I've used that technique which is called scenario planning, for thinking about what could happen with the future of the Uniting Church. I'm not making predictions. I'm not saying what I would like to see, but what are the 4 possibilities that could emerge? And one of them would be word and deed. In other words, that we consolidate churches, link them in social welfare, and create a network, really, of parallel Wesley missions.
And that letter that came earlier in the programme that I was sharing is that people often wonder why don't we just give up that and just get on with the community work?
Well, I've got a second scenario on that, which is that we allow the congregations just to die off and concentrate on that community work. Because if you look at the Uniting Church, a lot of people say the Uniting Church is declining. That's not true. If the Uniting Church had a consolidated set of accounts, it would be one of the largest corporations in Australia because of all the real estate, the aged care, the childcare, etc. But the real growth area in terms of money is actually in welfare, not the congregations. So a second scenario that I've done would be that of having Uniting Church just focusing on community welfare, as we've seen other Christian agencies going down that path. A third scenario is that you could end up with parishes rejecting all this focus on community welfare, government bureaucracy and all the rest of red tape, and just returning to the early church. And a fourth scenario is that the Uniting Church decides to wind itself up and you have the different pieces going in their own separate ways. Obviously, something like Wesley Mission could continue to operate on its own. The community welfare sector could also operate in its own way. So you'd actually see the dissolution of the Uniting Church and its reinvention in other contexts.
You've worked with 3 superintendents, really, over that, and it's a lot of years. None of us stay 10 minutes, do we? What's your reflection on that when you look, because they're all 3 very different characters. 3
very different characters, but all appropriate for the time. So if you take someone like Alan Walker, I learned to write media releases working with Alan Walker. You know, he showed me how you write the media release, which at that time worked well because we had a print media world in those days. Gordon Moyes was very much, although Alan Walker did TV, Gordon did a lot more of radio and TV, and you've obviously maintained that tradition and moved us across into the internet era with websites as well. So we've been very blessed that we've had, in my time, 3 superintendents who are obviously able to make the most of the opportunities for spreading the good news and also developing the welfare work for the mission.
And do you believe that the need for strong leadership is certainly something we still have to desire in the church? Absolutely.
You need to have one focal point, somebody at the top there who can make good decisions. The problem with the Uniting Church is that we come out of a mindset which says, well, we don't trust anybody to make any decisions. And so a lot of the rest of the Uniting Church is often just bogged down in a swamp because no one is willing to make decisions. I was involved with a parish where they had a minister who went off the rails. The Uniting Church reaction is, well, we've got to set up a committee to look at this. Whereas in the Anglican tradition, you send in somebody who's got complete power to sort something out. One person who can make the decision.
Keith, always talking to you is interesting. We always get tons and tons of material in such a short time.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the privilege of talking to you, reflecting. I'm not sure everybody in the Uniting Church will have enjoyed it as much as we have in our conversation. But you're realistic about what you believe and do, and it's a joy to work with you. We welcome now Jhoanna Aguila, who will sing The Blessing.
Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen.
Over the years of Wesley Impact, Keith Garner has had hundreds of conversations sharing stories of hope, resilience, love and the Christian faith. Perspectives on Faith and Entertainment is a collection of inspiring and insightful conversations with people who are leaders in their field, including former Queen of Pop, Deborah Byrne, pioneer songwriter Jeff Bullock, children's and country music entertainer Colin Buchanan, Golden Guitar winning duo Carter and Carter, seasoned performer and music mentor Daniel Kay, and renowned worship leader Darlene Check. Each conversation shares a unique perspective on entertainment and collectively presents a broad cross-section of performers and how their faith impacts their lives and others. Perspectives on Faith and Entertainment is the third instalment of a three-part series and is available now from Wesley Mission. To find out more, contact Wesley Mission on 02 9263 5555 or email impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
Now, the Bible passage I'm going to look at today is one of the most interesting and yet at the same time difficult parables of Jesus, often referred to as the workers in the vineyard. As one writer put it, God never deals with men and women on the basis of status, wealth, or even service, but on the basis of grace alone. Let me read to you Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through to 16. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I'll pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those who came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. Those who were hired first last worked only 1 hour. They said, "And you've made them equal to us, who've borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I'm generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Now, the original hearers would understand and identify with this story. In the second appointment I ever had in ministry, it was in a county town in Durham called Darlington. Not our Darlington, but the original one on the borders of North Yorkshire and County Durham. Population of about 100,000 people, but many, many rural towns that were nearby. And I remember talking to Bill Gowland, who came from the same town, about the fact that very often people were employed in exactly this biblical way. People who got no work in the difficult days of the 1930s, we call it the Great Depression all over the world. They would gather in the square and farmers would turn up with their trucks and look and probably see who was the most muscular of the, probably they're all then men, in the crowd there. They could go and work with him on the farm for the day. So it would be a familiar scene, not an unfamiliar situation. And many poor people would have found this to be a very challenging reality and seeking work in the marketplace. Yet many parables have this powerful twist about them. And it certainly has that. Keith talked earlier about writing pieces for the media. I mean, how would you write a story like this for the media? That some people who'd only worked a short period of time got the same pay as those who'd worked all day. But you see, God is the landowner and he treats people fairly. Now, treating people fairly can cause all kinds of challenges, especially if we can't grasp generosity. And God is a generous God, one who cares not only for those who've got, not only for those who are skillful, but for all people. At Wesley Mission, we've always had a place for those who are poorer, for those people who have not been at the top of the pile, and yet they still need to be cared for. And Matthew shares the words of Jesus as a conclusion to this powerful story, talking about the last and the first and how it's equally important. One writer writing on this passage said there is no more cherished word in the Christian vocabulary than grace. Grace is what it's about. You see, grace defines the Christian faith. It puts a new take on fairness. And it helps us to understand why it is and how it is we can work alongside people of all kinds and realize that God has a place for them. Grace is not sentimental, but life-giving, life-transforming. And when I read that particular parable in the 20th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, I don't think it's just about workers. I think it's about God's nature. Jesus gives us an insight to what he is like. He treats people like that, like the thief on the cross, like the person who was cast out. It's all of them matter. They all matter to God. And this truth, I think, is such an important one for all of us. And we've reflected a bit on the history of Wesley Mission in this programme, inevitably. But I think that one of the things that's carried us on and through has been our concern to make sure that people that others might not have time for can find time at Wesley Mission in our people, through our people. This isn't just a job for one person, it's the whole mission engaged in an outreach towards those in need. So when you think about grace, when you think about the love of God for all people, it may not make sense to us always that those who've come in at the very last are treated just as well as those people who have been there a lifetime. But it's the truth. And it's the truth that we see in Jesus, in his life, in his death, and in the power of resurrection. May we ever, ever be a people who are concentrating upon the gracious love of God.
If you would like to contact Keith and find out more about today's program, write to us at Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A 5555, Sydney South 1235, or you can send us an email to impacttv@wesleymission.org.au. On our website, you can catch up on past episodes of Wesley Impact, find out more about our work, read online magazines and articles, and connect with us on social media. You can also connect through Keith's blog and stay up to date on all the latest news and information from Wesley Mission, wesleymission.org.au.
Once again, thanks for being part of the programme. I hope you found the conversation with Keith Suter insightful, those thoughts on the parable of the workers of the vineyard challenging. It's sometimes difficult to understand that God is generous and his gifts are poured out fairly on all people. There's always something happening in the life of Wesley Mission. And I want to encourage you to visit our website as we continue to provide community services and carry on with the work that God has called us to. Also, do reach out if we can be of help to you. We sometimes get people who ask for help, and if we can, we do. The contact details are on the screen now, and I always look forward to hearing from you and spending this time together with you. Join us at the same time next week here on Wesley Impact. And until then, have a good week, and may God richly and truly bless your life.
Wesley Mission walks alongside people of all ages struggling with homelessness, addictions, mental health issues and financial stress. To find out more, visit wesleymission.org.au.